Hello everyone, thank you for joining the session. Today I'm going to present our work, Equilibrium Analysis of Electricity Markets with Day-Ahead Market Power Mitigation and Real-Time Intercept Bidding. This work is done in collaboration with UHN from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Pencheng Yu from Peking University, Enrique Mashala from Johns Hopkins University, and supported by grants from NSF. Let me start by introducing the electricity market with two-stage settlement. The first stage is the day-ahead market or forward market. As the name suggests, this occurs a day before the actual delivery. The market clears based on the forecast for demand for renewable sources like solar and wind energy and accounts for majority of electricity trade in the market. The second stage is the real-time market or spot market, and it occurs at a faster time scale, typically 5 minutes before delivery. Here, participants buy or sell to adjust their commitments. Basically, in the day-ahead market, participants take forward positions and hedge against uncertainty, while the real-time acts as a last resort. This two-stage sequential market was designed to efficiently operate trading in presence of uncertainty and has been a natural solution over decades now. Now let's see how this market with some inelastic demand is implemented when generators bid using the linear supply function that represent willingness of generators to participate as a function of price, or as we call it, slope function bidding, since we are bidding slope of the linear supply function. First, we have day-ahead clearing, where demand bids some estimate of forecasted demand and generators bid slope of the supply function. Once all the bids are submitted, market clears, giving schedule and prices to participants. After the day-ahead market clearing, participants similarly bid in the real-time market, and again market clears, giving schedule and prices to participants. The goal of the market is to meet inelastic demand while minimizing the cost of dispatch. The sum of generator dispatch and demand bids across the two stages denote the final output at delivery. However, the challenge is that there is evidence of unintended market power by participants in the market. To analyze this, research have looked at participant behavior, where they analyze individual incentives like profit or payment in both single-stage study and two-stage study. However, it is hard to gain insight into two-stage study due to the sequential nature of market from single-stage study. Whereas in the case of two-stage study, either participants assume prices are given, or if they are able to manipulate prices, then there is no guarantee of predictable market outcome. In particular, California ISO, one of the biggest electricity market in US, have documented market power in approximately 2% of total hours. To mitigate this, the ISO have proposed a system-level market power mitigation policy, where they substitute any non-competitive bid by participants with what they call as default bids based on an estimate of generators' cost. The question is where to implement this policy. Now, CAISO believes that real-time market is more susceptible to market power, and day-ahead market has additional measures like virtual bidding to put competitive pressure on the day-ahead market clearing. Therefore, they are starting with the implementation of policy in the real time first, followed by day-ahead market power mitigation policy in the second phase. And our focus is to understand how would the implementation of such initiatives affect participants' incentives and drive potential market outcomes. Let me introduce the model for market power mitigation policy in this two-stage setting. We assume that markets substitute with default bids based on an estimate of generator costs, then they're able to correctly estimate the true cost for simplicity. This is the standard two-stage market as we discussed. Now, if the policy is implemented in real time, then market ignores the bid of generators and correctly estimate the cost function based on which market is cleared. Generators can still bid as they wish in day ahead, whereas if the policy is implemented in day ahead, market ignore bids in day ahead and correctly estimate the cost of dispatch, and generators can bid in real time. Now, in this talk, we will first discuss the impact of policy when generators bid using the slope function bidding. Then we propose the intercept function bid for two-stage market and analyze the impact of policy in such market. And finally, we discuss the properties of market equilibrium under such policy. Let's start with policy analysis in the case of slope bidding. Now, starting with real-time market power mitigation, market correctly estimate the true cost of generators in real time, and generators only bid in day ahead using the slope function bid. As market correctly estimate the cost in real time, we can determine the prices in real time, and using the clearing from both the stages, the generators maximize its profit given by the difference between the revenue earned and the true cost of dispatching generators. Here, the superscript star denotes the real-time subgame equilibrium quantities as a function of day-ahead variables. Simultaneously, loads in the day-ahead are minimizing their net payment such that the allocation across two stages sum up to individual requirement of inelastic load. Thus, generators and loads here are playing Nash game, competing with each other for their own incentives. To analyze the market equilibrium, we look at two different participant behavior in the market. The first one is price taker, which assume prices are given in the market and respond to it optimally. And we say that market attains competitive equilibrium if such participants maximize their profit or payment while supply matches the demand. Another one is a strategic participant, which can manipulate prices in the market. And we say that market attains Nash equilibrium if such participants can maximize their profit or minimize their payment while supply matches the demand. In this setting, where with real-time market power mitigation, we observe that prices are equal to marginal cost in both stages. And therefore, loads are indifferent to allocation of demand across the two stages, meaning there is no incentive for load to allocate demand in day ahead. Whereas in the case of Nash equilibrium, which exists if there are more than two generators, we see that demand allocates all the demand in real time instead. And the reason is, since the market correctly estimates the cost of generators in real time, the prices are fixed in that time. And strategic loads and generators are trying to manipulate prices in day ahead instead, such that loads are trying to reduce prices in the day ahead, while generators are trying to increase prices instead. This competition between generators and loads leads to all the demand allocation in real time, which is not desirable. As you may recall, day ahead accounts for majority of trading in the market. In summary, either there is no incentive for market to allocate demand in day ahead, or it allocates all the demand in real time instead. Now, what if the policy is implemented in day ahead instead? Recall, market correctly estimates the cost in the day ahead, and generators bid in real time using the slope function bidding. We analyze this game backwards by analyzing the real-time market first. Given market clearing, generator maximizes its profit given by the difference between the revenue earned and the cost of dispatching generators. Observe that the day-ahead variables are fixed as market is able to correctly estimate the cost of dispatching generators, and the objective is a function of real-time bid only. Given the real-time subgame equilibrium, loads now minimize its payment in the market. And interestingly, in this setting, generators are acting as followers in the real time, while loads are acting as leader in the day ahead, leading to leader-follower dynamics or Stackelberg game. And at the same time, each generator and each load are trying to compete with each other for their own incentive, leading to a Nash game. Such a game is also referred to as Stackelberg-Nash game in some literatures. Now, in this setting, at competitive equilibrium, the prices are again not well defined in real time. And the reason is the prices are fixed in day ahead since market is able to estimate the cost of dispatching in day ahead, and both generators and load are trying to manipulate prices in real time, leading to all the demand being allocated in day ahead instead. Again, here, the individual load can still allocate arbitrarily. The net demand in real time is zero. Whereas for the Nash equilibrium, it exists if there are more than 3 generators and there are at most 2 more generators than loads in the market. Further, to obtain the closed form analysis, we assume that generators are homogeneous, meaning that they all have the same cost coefficient. Under such assumption, we see that now load allocates only fraction of load in the day ahead as generators acting strategically in the real time increase the prices in real time, forcing load to allocate the demand in day ahead. However, the symmetric Nash equilibrium may not always exist. In summary, in this case, load has incentive to allocate all its demand in day ahead at competitive equilibrium. However, the Nash equilibrium exists only under certain conditions. So far, we have analyzed the slope function bidding, where we bid slope of the linear supply function, and either Nash equilibrium is not desirable or exists only in certain conditions. To mitigate this, we propose intercept function bidding, originally proposed for analyzing the behavior of prosumers in single-stage study. And in this function bidding, we bid the intercept of the linear supply function, which has a constant slope. So moving to the second part, we analyze the impact of market power mitigation policy of the proposed intercept function bidding in 2 stages. Starting with real-time market power mitigation, where market correctly estimates the cost of dispatching generators in real time, and generators and load are playing Nash game in day ahead. We observe that the market equilibrium is similar to what we observe in day ahead for slope function bidding. Meaning, here also at competitive equilibrium, loads have no incentive to allocate demand in day ahead, and Nash equilibrium is not desirable as it allocates all the demand in real time instead. So in summary, the intercept function leads to similar market outcome as slope function bidding. And the question is, what about the day-ahead market power mitigation? Now recall, for the day-ahead market power mitigation, the formulation has a Stackelberg-Nash game where generators acts as follower in the real time, load acts as leader in the day ahead, and market is able to correctly estimate the cost of dispatch in day ahead. In such a setting, we see that the prices in the 2 stages is equal and all the demand is allocated in day ahead. However, for the Nash equilibrium, load again allocates fraction of demand due to generators being strategic in real time and driving prices higher in the real time. What's interesting is that the Nash equilibrium is unique, well-defined, and always exists for the more than 2 generators, with no additional conditions on market participants. In summary, we observe that in the case of intercept bidding, competitive equilibrium leads to all the demand in day ahead, and the unique Nash equilibrium characterizes participant incentive and does not require any restrictive conditions on market participants. So in terms of policy implementation, we have seen so far that real-time market power mitigation policy leads to undesirable Nash equilibrium, and ISO is better off implementing the policy starting with day-ahead market instead. Further, for day-ahead market power mitigation in between the two functions, slow function bidding or intercept function bidding, we observe that intercept function bidding can always predict market outcome. This leads to our final part of the presentation, where we analyze the properties of market equilibrium with day-ahead market power mitigation and real-time intercept function bidding. In order to build intuition, we look at the unilateral strategic behavior of participants, that is, the case where either generators or load are strategic, here abbreviated by NEG or NEL. Now, starting with NEG, the Nash equilibrium with strategic generators only, we observe that it is same as competitive equilibrium. And the reason is generators acting as followers in real time and acting strategically in real time is able to manipulate prices in the real time. However, load still acting as leader in the day ahead can shift all the demand in the day ahead where the prices are lower compared to real time. Whereas in the case of Nash equilibrium with strategic loads, we see that load being acting as a leader in the head is able to manipulate prices, allocating portion of load in day ahead where the prices are lower compared to the real time. So interestingly, if the loads are truthful in day ahead, generators cannot exercise market power. Whereas if the loads are strategic, they can manipulate prices and there is no incentive for them to allocate all the demand in day ahead. Using the closed form equilibrium, using the closed form solution, now we can dig deeper and understand market power of participants through different perspectives, like social cost from market perspective. At Nash equilibrium, strategic participants manipulate prices and increase the social cost to the market. However, interestingly, if the generators are homogeneous, then the social cost aligns with the competitive equilibrium in the market. Next, we analyze from individual perspective and analyze payment or profit of participants. Now, since Nash equilibrium with strategic generators aligns with the competitive equilibrium, the payment is same for the two. But load being strategic, in the case of Nash equilibrium with strategic load, it reduces its payment relatively. However, when both generators and loads are strategic, due to strategic behavior of generators, the payment of load increases, but load still acting as leader in the market anticipate behavior of generator and manages to keep the payment at Nash equilibrium below the competitive equilibrium. Now, the interesting question here is, can generators also do the same? Recall that the Nash equilibrium with strategic generators aligns with the competitive equilibrium, and therefore the profit is also same. Now, this profit reduces when load becomes strategic in the market. Though the profit with strategic loads and strategic generators increases due to strategic behavior of generators in the market, load is still acting as leader in the day ahead can manage to keep its payment lower in the market and the profit of generators lower at Nash equilibrium compared to the competitive equilibrium, meaning that generators aggregate profit is always less than the competitive equilibrium. So in summary, we observe that at market equilibrium with day-ahead market power mitigation and real-time intercept bidding, loads are winners as they can reduce their payment at Nash equilibrium below the competitive equilibrium, whereas generators suffer at the hands of load, earning lower profit in the market. Now we want to observe the impact of some of the market parameters on the Nash equilibrium. For example, one such parameter is the slope of the intercept function. For the case when B is very small, the demand allocation and generator dispatch in the market at Nash equilibrium approaches competitive equilibrium, as also seen on the left side of the figure. Whereas for the case when B is very large, the Nash equilibrium allocation and dispatch approaches to the case when Nash equilibrium with strategic loads. And the same behavior is observed for the individual payment and profit, meaning that market has a tuning parameter in the form of the slope of the intercept function bed, such that for small enough b, the Nash equilibrium approaches the competitive equilibrium. Continuing this, we finally look at the case of heterogeneous generator and understand its impact with two generators for simplicity. Now, if the generators are almost homogeneous, meaning they have approximately same cost coefficient, then the ratio of aggregate profit or payment at Nash equilibrium versus competitive equilibrium is always less than 1, as you can observe in the left of the curve where delta is almost 0. However, in the case when one of the generators is cheaper than the other, interestingly, the ratio approaches 1, meaning the heterogeneity amongst generators mitigates the load market power. In summary, we looked at the strategic behavior of participants under the proposed market power mitigation policy for two separate bidding functions, namely slope function bidding and intercept function bidding. We observed that the ISO is better off implementing the market power mitigation policy starting with day-ahead stage instead of real-time, as strategic competition can lead to undesirable market outcome with all the load in real-time. Finally, for the day-ahead market power mitigation and real-time intercept bidding, equilibrium is well defined. Perfect competition leads to all the demand day-ahead, whereas in the case of Nash equilibrium, loads are the winners as they act as leader in the market and can reduce their payment at Nash equilibrium compared to competitive equilibrium. Still, the market has a tuning parameter in the form of slope of intercept function bidding to achieve efficiency, and Nash equilibrium approaches competitive equilibrium for small enough b. And finally, the heterogeneity in generators or heterogeneous generators can affect the market power of loads. Thank you for listening to this.